Well, happy Tuesday to you. I am Jen Yates. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation on LRS102.com. And as always, I'm super pumped because I have a great friend up in the studio with me, Mr. Steve Cooley. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here with you, Jen.
I'm happy you're here with me because one, you're my favorite banjo player, of course. And
that's pretty heavy. I don't know how to process that.
Right. And I will give you credit because you didn't do my first record ever, but you did my first record once I got to Louisville, produced it. So yeah, with Crash Henry,
that's been a year or two.
Man,
a minute
almost
or two.
21, almost, because I moved here in '99.
Can't be. I'm not that old.
Well, Steve, it's so cool. You've done all kinds of amazing things in your career, and you're a professional musician. You've been playing forever. You work at Guitar Emporium, too, right there on Bardstown Road, and have for a long time. We were just kind of talking about that off record. I just want to ask you a few questions. That's what I always do with my musicians, and get to know you just a little bit better. But let's start by telling our listeners, how did you get your start in music? Why did you pick the banjo?
The banjo. When I was a kid, there was you didn't have the Netflix or any streaming shows, so you had to watch network TV. And there was a show called The Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, yeah.
And like a whole lot of guys that are sort of in my age range, if you didn't grow up hearing country music or bluegrass music, then your first exposure to the banjo might have been the Beverly Hillbillies. And
that's a good point.
I heard that sound on the Beverly Hillbillies show, and I had to figure out what it was. And it was a number of years before I got around to getting a banjo after I figured out what it was, but
yeah,
that was sort of my first introduction to it.
Wow. Was that the first instrument that you played?
I played the trumpet.
Okay.
My sister was in the orchestra.
Okay.
You know, when we were little children back in the day, they had music programs at the school, and when you were in second or third grade, they'd let you pick out an instrument to play, and if you could convince your parents into hooking you up with an item to play. And I was going to be a trumpet player, so I got a trumpet somewhere second or third grade and messed around with that. And at some point when I was around 8 years old, it seemed like every neighborhood had a rock band or two that would play up and down the street. You know, the teenage boys would all, were playing Beatles music and Creedence music and all kinds of stuff. But there was a couple of fellas that lived up the street from me that played guitar. And I took part of my lawn mowing money, and I think I paid them $5, $10, $15 for a classical guitar that they had spray painted and put a gigantic pick guard on it and some sort of electric guitar pickup in the sound hole. And
interesting.
And they said they would give me one guitar lesson if I bought the guitar. So they showed me how to play House of the Rising Sun.
Oh, that's a favorite of mine to play.
So I was sort of on the guitar for a little bit.
Very cool. Okay, and then somehow you maneuver over into banjo.
I maneuvered into a banjo, yeah. Lawn mowing money again. One of the kids that we all would play neighborhood baseball and football and stuff. And one of the kids that lived up and around the corner, his parents had bought him a banjo, but they liked Dixieland music. They weren't, bluegrass.
Right.
Lester Flatt, Earl Scruggs banjo fans. They were all about, sort of the Dixieland straw hat, striped vest.
Yeah, there's still some of those Dixieland bands around too, which is really cool.
There's a bunch of those, but they bought him a 5-string banjo, not knowing anything about banjos, and he didn't really care anything about banjos anyway. So I ended up buying the banjo from them with my lawn mowing money. But back at that particular time, that was probably 70, maybe 69, 70, 71-ish, somewhere in that time period of the 1900s. For all you youngsters out there.
I need my sound effects today.
Yeah. But I got a banjo from him, but I couldn't figure out how to tune it because there wasn't the YouTube or the internet. And I didn't know any banjo players. And all the banjo players that I knew of were on television, and I didn't know how to call them. So
yeah.
I had that banjo probably for a year or two. And I went to my grandparents' farm down in Cumberland County.
Hey, that's a Matt area there. I'm a Dare, so Cumberland. My mom worked at the in the court systems in Cumberland County.
There you go, Burkesville.
Yeah, still have
shout
family
out
down
to
there.
Burkesville.
Yeah,
but there was a fella there that played old time banjo and two-finger style banjo, and he showed me how to tune it because I kept trying to tune it, and I would go to the library and look up in the music dictionary, how do you tune a 5-string banjo? And I broke string.
You didn't have the YouTube back then.
Yeah, I broke string after string because I wasn't understanding what they were trying to explain in the book.
But yeah. So by now, how long have you been playing banjo?
Longer than I haven't. I don't know. We'd have to count backwards. I'm 60, and I would say I really sort of got started at whittling on it when I was about 12.
Okay. So a long time. Yeah. I've always heard that the banjo is more almost a percussion instrument.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, in the Scruggs 3-finger style playing, you're sort of being a rhythm instrument that messes around with the melody because everything's based on these finger patterns that you do with your thumb, index, and middle finger. So you sort of weave the melody in around the rhythmic aspect of what you're doing with your...
Yeah. Explain to our listeners, there may be people out there listening that have no idea about banjo, and I'm kind of one of those. Although I will tell you, my grandmother played banjo. She played guitar,
what a wonderful
organ, and
woman
banjo.
she was.
Yes, she was. My Granny Dimple. She was a very sweet lady. You would have loved her. Only about 4'11". She was very short. But she was a pianist and organist and also played, pretty good banjo and pretty good guitar and dulcimer. She loved stringed instruments.
See,
for sure.
just like all the musicians, she had to come up with something else to double on so that she could get all the gigs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she was a librarian by day and also a painter. I pretty much credit her with all of the Yates side of the creativity and the music because... Yeah. My family on the Yates side in Adair County, they would always get together, and they were always string bluegrass players. That's their style, more the white gospel and the bluegrass stuff. And my dad was like the lone rock and roller, that played drum set. The rest of them, they all had I had a cousin major in mandolin bluegrass playing, and his son is now playing lead guitar down in Nashville, and they're all scattered, but. I always thought it was fascinating, the banjo thing.
It's sort of, people used to play music, before they had a whole lot of radio coverage or television stuff.
Exactly.
My mom's people, they had a shape note singing quartet that would go to singing conventions and
that's cool.
do that. And two of those fellows played old-time fiddle, and her great aunt played the piano that was in part of that quartet, but they would all get together and play music apparently when they were younger people for their own enjoyment.
Yeah, well, where I'm from, it was all French port sitting, kind of picking stuff, and drum sets weren't really in the music that they were playing, but me and my dad were jamming out on drum set, and percussion. I also had a couple of my uncle played drums in the Army. Everybody in the Yates side of the family pretty much played something. Yeah, so all the holidays were them getting together and jamming out and, singing, and it's just a big old holly jolly time pretty much. I do love the banjo, though. Always had a fond place in my heart for it because I grew up playing a lot of steel guitar conventions and things like that. And one of my first memories of playing was at pedal steel guitar conventions. They would just put me on the seat and then tell me, I was like the kid, so they could go party. So they'd be like, just play a shuffle. They'd teach me the shuffle and then be like, just play it as long as you can. We'll see you later. And then I was there playing, shuffles all night. So I kind of got my start in country and steel guitar playing, and
those steel guitar conventions are a trip too.
Yes, they are.
Those guys are into it.
Oh yeah,
like way into it.
Yeah,
about
very
gear.
Into it.
They're worse gear hounds than anybody I've ever met.
Yeah, do you ever play with Johnny Berry? Because he's
I
one
play with John all the time.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Because he's one of my favorite pedal steel players around town.
Yeah, he's in all those guys around town are they're always trying to figure out if they can get a different string gauge to do something, or if they're going to be able to I'm thinking about setting this so I can make another move with this one knee lever, so it's going to go up a half step to this first stop, and then if I kick it a little further, it goes up a whole step.
Yeah.
They're all the time. It's a hot rod.
Yeah.
They're always trying to figure out.
Those steel guitars, I would think, are pretty expensive too.
Yeah, it's a commitment if you decide to jump in on one of those. I've done that a couple of times.
Really?
And I love the instrument, but it's awfully heavy to carry.
Yeah. You know, I just saw, do you know who Jeff Baxter is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just did some recording with him, and he came in with this little lap.
Yeah, he's got one that's got the palm stuff on the end, on the tailpiece.
Yeah, and it's real light, and it's just teeny. I had never seen anything quite like it, but he made it sound amazing.
Oh, yeah,
and
I've heard him play it a couple of times. He showed it to me after he got all that stuff on there. And
shout out to Jeff if you're listening.
Yeah.
I've been trying to get him in on the show. You know, he's producing, is it Lincoln Bridge's new record, Lincoln Bridge. The quartet that sings around town that did the Kentucky Derby national anthem and all that. Anyway, yeah, so hopefully we'll get him in on the show. And also, you're playing with who now? Because literally you play with everybody. I see you with almost everybody.
No, it seems like I don't play with that many people compared to some other people, but I'm not going to name names.
Yeah.
But, let's see. Well, I play with Bluegrass with the Hog Operation.
Yeah,
we
okay.
do that. That's a
Let's talk about Hog
thing.
Operation, because that's one of my favorite. That's when I first, I think, saw you play, was with Hog Operation. And I believe, I'm not for sure exactly how we met, but I believe it was in the basement of what is now Barrett Bar.
Yeah, the old Baritones bar.
Baritones, that's right.
That Mac and Brent Atnip had, yeah.
Yeah, and for some reason, some friends of mine when I first got to town had asked me to come to that gig, and I was like, wow, who are these guys? And it was Hog Operation that night.
Yeah.
Now, is it still the original 4 lineup?
Same batch of guys. Same batch of guys, yeah. Mike Schroeder's playing the mandolin, and Screaming John Hawkins is on the guitar, and Larry Rayleigh plays the bass and sings. And I guess Mike and Larry and I have been playing music together off and on since, 1979 maybe.
Wow, that's a long time, yeah.
A long time. We jammed around a little bit as pals before that. And I've known Screaming John since he was about 5 years old. And
yeah, I remember that story a little bit. Like you and his father were close, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And man, he's still around. I need to get him on the show too. He'd be a hoot. Yeah, he'd be a hoot on the show.
You'll have to. He's got all educated and does legitimate day work.
Oh, he
does.
I didn't know that. Yeah,
it would be hard. Yeah. No, he's become quite the scholar.
I did not know
he was
that.
always a gentleman, but yes.
Well, good for him, man. I've had some great nights hanging out with him, and I love to watch him play always because he's phenomenal.
He's a great player. He's a good fella.
Yeah. Well, good for him. We'll have to try to get him on the show, even if it is pre-recorded. One of my favorite moments, too, is that you all cover some really interesting stuff in Hog Operation. I remember you covering Prince specifically early on.
Yeah, we did some Prince stuff there for a minute.
I think it was a Sexy MFer.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
And I thought, I had never quite seen a bluegrass group do something like that.
We're just silly sometimes.
Yeah, but it worked because it's ingrained in my brain forever.
Tunes are just tunes, you know.
Yeah.
If just play a song, it's a song.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so cool to have you up in the studio today. So other than Hog Operation, you do play with Bridget Caitlin, right?
Bridget Caitlin, we've been playing a bunch of music together. We went to Scotland earlier this year for a little tour, and she's over, I think she's playing in Switzerland this weekend.
Wow. We also need to get her up in here. Yeah, when she's in town, because... Yep. Is that hard to catch her in town? Because she's always all over the place, seems like.
I think we've got some sort of event we're playing with some people next week, so I think she's in for a little while.
Okay,
we
good.
were talking about going back across perhaps somewhere November-ish, December-ish, or the first part of next year. But yeah, I don't
Well, that's cool. I've never gotten to play overseas, but I can imagine that it would be fantastic.
It's really they really appreciate music over there. It's more a part of their cultural thing. They like all kinds of music, and they.
Now, when you play with her, do you play as a duo, or do you have other members?
It depends. When we've been going over to Scotland and England, we've been doing a duo thing.
Okay,
but
cool.
We do have a ensemble situation that we use. Sometimes Dennis Ledford plays with us, and we sort of take turns depending on who feels like playing guitar or who feels like playing bass.
Yeah. Does she play her saw?
Yeah.
Because I always love that about her, that she played this saw.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine art, I would think.
I can't make a noise on it. It's a whole lot of times we'll get people to try and play it. There was one place we played in Scotland, and everybody that wanted to try it was able to at least get some sort of sound out of it.
Interesting. I mean, how do you even begin to play a saw? I mean, I've only seen her do it in a live setting, like from a distance, but you lay it across your lap and scrape it with something?
No, you sort of
like wobble it?
Hold the tip of it with the teeth. You don't use the bow on the toothed side. You use it on the flat side, but you scrape across it, and it acts like it's a string on a cello or a violin, and you have to hold it with your thumb and your forefinger and bend it into a little bit of a specific S curve, and that's how you...
Does it have a certain, like, pitch to it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is pitched.
I mean, she plays songs on it.
That's interesting to me, yeah.
Yeah, she goes to Nashville and plays on people's records.
Yeah. Well, heck yeah. Who didn't want a saw on their record? I mean, I would.
It's pretty neat sounding.
Yeah.
We've done a couple of things where we used it as atmosphere sort of things on her songs and other people's songs.
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask you, you've been at Guitar Emporium for a long time. And that seemed to be because I'm not from Louisville. I'm a transplant to Louisville. But it seems like, I've been in the Highlands for a long time. It seems like a main location for a lot of musicians. And I'm glad it's still around, FYI. Glad you're still there. You've been there how long now?
29 or 30 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. I've always heard stories about there were very famous people that would come up in there to purchase guitars and things like that when they would be in town.
Sometimes we'd take them to them. Sometimes they'd call on the phone and we'd mail them guitars.
Yeah. Who's the coolest person you've met so far?
The coolest person I've ever met.
While you're working there.
Sold a guitar
to. Let's go with that one.
I don't know. I've sold guitars to a lot of people, and most of them were really happy to be buying guitars.
Well, yeah.
Who
doesn't want a new guitar?
Depending on where you're at in your rock and roll career,
right.
You might not be able to go out and just ride around and shop for guitars.
Well, yeah, most musicians probably not so much.
Keith Richards was really swell. All those guys were really nice. They were really neat.
The Stones walking up in there.
I took stuff to them at a couple of different shows, but they were just so tickled to be looking at guitars, and they just really wanted to entertain you. It was funny.
Man, I just taught Honky Tonk Woman last week to a kid, and actually Monday I taught it to him on Monday per his request.
Yeah.
And I talked to him and educated him a lot on the Stones and Charlie Watts and and the whole band, and he was asking me, how old are they? Are they still touring? I was like, they are still touring. Can you believe? I mean, how long of a career that they? I mean, it's just amazing to me.
I think it's great. Well, what else are they going to do other than go out and play some tunes? They obviously don't need the money.
No, they definitely don't need the money.
But they still like to go out and play.
I just love that they're still together, because to keep a band together that long is incredibly hard.
Well, they take a pretty long hiatus at various times, but they've all been friends since they were teenagers, so
they've been around each other forever.
That's longer than I'm sure they've been married to.
half of the marriages they've had. Yeah.
Which wife they're married to. But yeah.
What day is it? Yeah, I know. Yeah, Mick Jagger likes to roll through them, doesn't he?
Yeah, he apparently does. I didn't get to meet him. I met the other guys, and they were all Charlie Watts and Ronnie Wood. They were all really nice. And Keith Richards, he wanted to make you a drink no matter what room you were in. If you changed one room to go over and see the other guys in the common area, then he'd scoop you out a big cup of ice. And
was he still drinking at the time? Does he still drink? I guess he does.
I don't know. I haven't been around him in several years, but
wow,
he put on the illusion that he did
back in the day.
Those several times.
Well, I love the Rolling Stones. I don't think it gets any better than them. I mean, obviously they're a little sloppy in their technique and playing and all that, but there's just something magical about the Stones.
It's a machine, the way it all goes together.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to me. So that's really cool. You got to meet Charlie Watts, one of my favorite drummers of all time.
A real gentleman. He was a nice guy. He bought a guitar. He asked Ronnie Wood which guitar he should buy.
Yeah.
He bought a guitar. Let's see, I think Jimmy sold him a guitar once upon a time, and he bought a guitar from myself and Greg Land one time, and then I sold him a guitar one time.
Very cool. Wow. Super great stories. I could see all kinds of... I heard, and I don't know if it's true, I heard back in the day that, the Dead would come through the Highlands, and like Janis Joplin and characters like that.
Well, I think if you were out on tour, they all sort of came through here trying to get someplace else, because back before there were stadiums and great big venues, everybody was playing like funny little rooms, because that was what it was.
What you did, yeah.
The Gardens down here, there was a whole lot of people that played there.
The Gardens went out right as I started to come into Louisville, so I don't know a lot about the history of it.
This building that we're in here, they used to have people that came through here and played.
Right. Yeah, we were just talking about that for our listeners that don't know. We're downtown on East Broadway, the Louisville Studios. That used to be the old Guild Theater building, and it's a dilapidated theater up top that this Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath and who'd you say, the Allman Brothers and Marvin Maxwell was talking about a slew of musicians that used to play through here, and he was talking about all the gigs used to be very magical and whatnot, and they're actually looking for investors to reinvest in that studio and renovate it.
Well, this would be a nice venue.
Yeah, the only downfall is there's not a lot of parking around these areas. So, but anyway, well, Steve, it's been awesome having you up in my studio today, and we're going to have you until 4 o'clock. So I want to tell everybody to kind of hang in there and stay tuned, because we've got all kinds of cool things we're going to talk about. And since you were just talking about the Rolling Stones, I thought it would only be right.
Oh, yeah, let's play some Stones.
To play some Stones. This is one of my favorite tracks because I got to play with Bobby Keys, and he was telling me about a story about this. When you hear his solo, he's waking up out of a drunken stupor in the studio, grabs his sax, runs across the room, and then lays down the exact solo we hear. It's the Stones with Can You Hear Me Knockin' on LRS 102. It's CCR with the Midnight Special. You're locked on to Jyneration Nation, LRS102.com. I do want to remind everybody that you can join LRS102.com at the Tiger Room this Saturday, August 17th from 9 until midnight for the SWP CD release party for Trans Am Jams. Not only will you get new music from an LRS Fest artist, SWP, but you'll get a free shot at Louder Than Life tickets and a chance to save $10 on special discounted LRS Fest tickets. Great music, great venue, great times. Join the Walrus, LRS102.com this Saturday. That's 9 to midnight at the Tiger Room. Have you heard of that, Steve Cooley, the Tiger Room?
I'm not familiar with the Tiger Room. Where is the Tiger Room?
I wasn't either until they educated me that it's in the back of Trixie's. And they bought the old toy tiger sign, evidently, and they have now placed it over there and made a venue called the Tiger Room. It used to be something else, but bands play there now. Isn't that wild? Huh. You ever played a strip club?
I have.
Have you?
It's right been a number of years, but I have done that before. But I didn't know they were calling that the Tiger Room.
I didn't either.
Is it a rock room, I'm guessing?
SWP is very heavy metal, kind of, yes. So I'm assuming it is.
So are they big hair and everything?
They're not big hair. They actually look like a big bunch of bikers, like buffed bikers, bald guys with actually, I was a big fan because I went to see them. I was just telling you this. I went to the tap room to see all these bands compete for who was going to play LRS Fest this year, which is coming in October. And I caught these guys, SWP, which I still don't know what their name means, but I hear that I cannot probably say it on air. So I can only imagine what it is. But
I think I connected the dots and sort of have an idea, but I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, same, yeah. Well, and the funny thing, I don't know if you know this about LRS, but we have a swear jar here, so anytime you can cuss because we get away with bypassing FCC regulations because we stream now. And what we do is I put money in a change jar, and then at the end of the month, we donate it off to charity, so nobody can get mad at us for playing cuss words or saying cuss words.
There you go.
But either way, I saw these SWP cats play, and this guy had a wireless, on his guitar, and I thought, what is this going to be all about? And it was kind of like screamo metal, but they really had the crowd into it, and they were the lead front is very showmanshipy. Yeah. So he was up on the bar and
rock show.
Man, it was a straight up rock show on in the Highlands, and that's one of the reasons I'm not from here. I don't have family here, so it's just me here. And I'm single, so I don't date anybody really, and so I just kind of float around the Highlands a lot, and that's one of the reasons I do love the Highlands and have always loved the Highlands. There's so many different little scenes. And I'm sure more than anybody, you've seen it change over the years. There used to be all kinds of cool venues you could play. There still are some, but they're few and far between nowadays. We were just talking about Phoenix Hill's gone, Jim Porter's gone. The hotel scenes are totally different with hiring DJs and such. And what's your take on, I know you were talking about the gardens going under. You've been playing around here for years. What's your take on the current situation in the music scene here locally? Well,
people like music here in Louisville.
Yes.
It seems like that we don't really have music-specific venues anymore. It seems like we have lots of sports bars.
Yeah, that's true. We do.
And they all like to have music on the weekend, it seems like, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and maybe somebody on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but brunch is big here.
It's not really, as I was trying to explain to somebody that was yelling at me at the store because one of the club managers or the head waitress or somebody was mad that they were playing on a night when there was a ball game. And they were very upset because it was hurting that person's tip or they weren't selling enough drinks. And I said, dude, anytime you go in a place and you set up on the floor in front of a TV bigger than your garage door, you're added value for the venue. You are not a feature of the venue.
Correct.
All those TVs that are playing, the UK U of L game, that's the main attraction. You're just there as an add-on so that whoever's in there buying drinks, maybe you'll bring a few people in, and the people that are there, maybe they'll stay because you're going to play something they want to hear, or they're going to find a companion for the evening.
Yes.
It's not about promoting the music. It's not about promoting the scene. Mm-hmm. It's about selling drinks at the bar, and you're setting up on the floor when they move the tables out of the way.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the big change I've seen. I mean, there used to be down on Main Street and Washington Street, there were clubs, they had stages, and national acts would come through, local acts would play. We had the Toy Tiger, which was a big rock showcase sort of thing. Had dance bands in, places had stages. People went out to dance and have a good time. There used to be an after-hours thing over at this bowling alley called, what is it? It's over on Goldsmith Lane. I don't think it's the Rose Bowl. Maybe it was. But back when the clubs closed at 1, everybody would get off their gig and they would go to the bowling alley, and you had to know the secret knock.
I love that.
You could get in.
It's like a speakeasy.
And, and there was a great band playing there. Willie D and a bunch of guys were playing horns, good band.
Yeah.
Everybody'd go in, jam, party for a while, see some music, but there were stages anywhere that you went to play. It wasn't like, we're going to knock these tables out of the way and let me know when I can turn the TV off for you.
Yeah, back in the good old days, as we call it. What do you do? You also think? Because I've had a lot of other older artists in here talking about how, obviously we don't want people out there drinking and driving and stuff like that and hurting other people. But at the same time, a lot of those laws that came out back in the day really did hurt the venues.
It made people uptight. My folks used to go out and see bands of their liking. They weren't going to, like the Tiger or anything.
Right.
But they would go out, 2 or 3 times a month and see
the
Cumberlands or somebody else that was doing sort of country stuff. But after they started marking tires and everything, my dad, he wouldn't get loaded and drive.
Yeah.
At least he said he wouldn't get loaded and drive. And he always represented himself as very responsible to me, in my opinion. But he just quit going out. And I'm sure that there's a whole lot of people that were a little bit older that just said, I'm not going to take a chance on it, because if I go someplace and I sit there and watch a band for 3 sets and they put 3 hash marks on my tires and pull me over when I come out, and maybe I've had 2 beers, maybe I've had a drink and 2 beers. And,
and the legal limit's like 0.08 now. So, I mean, that's like one cocktail pretty much can take you under.
And he said it's just not worth taking the risk. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. And obviously I'm from the country where there were no bars.
Yeah.
In fact, it was a dry county. We had a bootlegger, in White City. You'd pull up to this little trailer and give him $5, and some guy would sneak out of something, and give you a bunch of alcohol.
Yeah.
And what would kill me is the cops would always sit at the end of the street and bust everybody coming up out there. I mean, there's only one way in and then one way out. Yeah. But where I was from growing up, as horrible as it sounds, I mean, people just packed their coolers of alcohol and put them right there in the front seat and would drive around the country. That's kind of the situation I come from. And then I get up here and I'm like, whoa, obviously everything changed.
Yeah.
But, some of those people still do that.
Yeah, I knew somebody from out away from the big city here, and they were trying to explain to me that a trip from where they lived on the 2-lane to get to the interstate and all the way to Nashville was a half case of beer.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
So...
Yeah, I judge it by songs. I'm like, I can play a record from here to there, or 2 records from here to there. Which ones am I listening to? Yeah. Do you ever do that, like judge distance by songs? Song length?
No. A whole lot of times I'll, if I'm driving a long distance, I like to sort of try and scoot across the radio dial.
Yeah, I like to do that too.
So it's,
there's always something interesting that you'll find on there.
I think I just sort of always gauge it by time for how, not necessarily how long a song is.
Yeah. Well, let's go back. I've got all kinds of questions about. So what was the first group that you ever found yourself in?
The first group that I ever found myself in.
Yeah, I'm going to say first group that actually like started making some money and really doing it.
Well, I had a little sort of acoustic duo thing with my friend from high school, B.J. Davis, and we played at a pizza place over on Hikes Lane. And they gave us $50 a piece and pizza at the end of the night. And that was when we were
Not the beginning.
That was when we were 14 or 15, maybe.
Yeah.
13, 14, and then shortly after that, it seems like, let's say I had a high school rock band with some guys.
Yeah.
And we played a couple of like teen dances.
Very cool.
Somewhere in the middle of all that, I started playing banjo with some of the older guys that were playing in clubs that they had like a regular Tuesday night or Wednesday night thing at the old Butchertown pub. I played with some guys over there.
Is that venue still around?
It's the Odeon these days.
Oh, the Odeon. Okay, gotcha.
Odeon,
I actually really like the Odeon.
Yeah, it's a great space. I mean, back in the day, in the middle 70s, early 80s, that place was before Phoenix Hill. That was the spot. and everybody on their way home from all the hospitals, doctors, lawyers, nurses, everybody, they
frequent that
they
location.
would go there for happy hour,
Yeah.
and it was off the hook constantly. That was one of the places to go.
Yeah.
And Jim Porter's, it wasn't what it turned into, but it was another sort of hangout. There was a place called Flaherty's out in the East End.
Okay.
And the aforementioned bowling alley, and there was some place called Peter Outlaw's. And if you had somebody from the Wolf Brothers here, they could probably tell you all about Peter Outlaw's.
Oh, yeah. You know, Jeff Jarboe was in week 1.
Was he?
Yeah. And
I love Jeff.
Me too. He's one of
great.
my favorite drummers around town. And, of course, we've got so many great drummers here. It's
we just
hard
got
to...
a whole lot of great pickers of all kinds
Yeah,
here, man.
we really do.
People don't understand what an amazing amount of talent there is here in town.
I agree with that.
It's just because you can everybody says, go to Nashville. You can go to Nashville, and Nashville's cool, and there's a whole lot of really cool clothing down there.
Yeah.
But
boots and spurs.
For square space, I think we got a whole lot of really great musicians here, maybe more than they probably have in Nashville. It always seems to me like there's some sort of okay guys there, and there's some really good guys, and then there's like a handful of people that would just make you lose your mind because they are freaking untouchable. But we sort of got that going on here. There's a whole lot of really great players of all kinds.
I talk about that a lot too, and there's a lot of different musical scenes here.
Yeah.
You know, depending on what you want. I mean, you're more of a bluegrass player, right? I mean, for the most part, what do you consider?
Music, man. I just like it all. I play a whole lot of bluegrass, but I play electric guitar with Johnny Berry.
Yeah, that's right. You do play electric. Yeah.
We do the weird country thing, and
I love the country thing. It's got its own special little niche.
Sometimes with my friend Stephen Couch and his band, The Betweeners, and that's sort of more of a singer-songwriter thing. And I play with Bridget, whatever she does. I play Irish music with some people.
I love that. Well, what I was meaning by that is, you can go see jazz if you want. You can go see bluegrass. You can see old school country. You can see metal, obviously, right on Bardstown Road. You can pretty much see a little, and we do have a big singer-songwriter community here as well, I kind of was starting to pay, I've paid attention to it for a while, but when we did She Castle, which was an event, a benefit where we brought together all these women musicians and had an all-female house band backing all these awesome singers around town. The goal was to get singers of all different musical styles, whether it be jazz or blues or R&B soul or rock and roll or whatever. We even had a country artist, and we did some hip-hop there too. So we literally wanted to cover all music styles and not put anyone down. And what's funny is some of the band had been in the cover band scene here.
Sure.
Which is a pretty, you can get in that scene. I've been in that scene for a while and play Kingfish and the Levee and all these places, doing cover music. And then half of the other, the other half of the band was in nothing but original music scene. And those two scenes very rarely cross each other.
Yeah.
So a lot of these artists didn't know each other. And a lot of time, this was their first time meeting and being a part of something. So it was really cool. Sherry Edwards was on that list. Tanita Gaines, who I'm doing some gigging with. Tanita was the first female that allowed me to play on stage when I moved to town at 21. I don't know what she was thinking, but she let me get up, and it was somewhere in St. Matthews, some venue I just stumbled into, and I happened to sit down and talk to her and told her I was a drummer, and she said, well, get on stage and play some Bonnie Raitt, and I was like, okay, cool. So we did.
She's so... Her and Sherry both are sort of larger than life characters.
I agree.
They're just
wow, and their vocals, man.
Oh yeah.
Their
They're
vocals,
both powerhouses, but their personalities are just wonderful.
I agree. I love Sherry. After she was in here on the show as well. Tanita, we're trying to get in here. Of course, she's going through a little bit of sickness and stuff like that, trying to stay healthy. So we'll say a special prayer for her. But, the whole lineup was pretty amazing. Robbie Bartlett, who's also a powerhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Kimmett Cantwell, another powerhouse,
Two awesome ones right there.
Yeah, and then I don't know, did you know a guy named Phil Phillips here who played in a blues band called Them Tarnations? He had been playing around for a long time. he had recently passed, and we brought in his daughter because they used to sing together.
Right.
And she had not sung since her dad's passing. She sang at his funeral, and that was it. And so she brought in his little gold microphone and started the show off. So we thought it was only right to honor him. And, you know, I got to thinking about this, and we were talking about this earlier off record. I was putting it together for a friend of mine. Like, I considered, you know, sometimes in life you play with a lot of different people, and different musicians have different sparks with you, you know, emotionally, you know, physically playing, creativity wise. And Bev and me just had that magic spark. We loved to write together. We had so much fun. You know, we would just be like, let's just write, you know, a song about big ass diamond rings, and we would write it, you know, and produce it and whatever. But yeah, I was doing it in her honor, and I got to looking around, and it was like Kemet had just lost Doug, and then Georgia Phillips had just lost her father, and Marjorie Marshall had somebody she had lost. Sherry Edwards talked to me about losing one of her musical soulmates, you know, and it was like all these people had all that in common, that they had lost somebody super important to them that they had played music with for a long time. And obviously we just lost my bass player of 12 years, Sue Riley, you know, and just, it's so hard when you lose, when you've got that magic spark, and then all of a sudden you don't ever get to play music with them again.
You're not going to get to do it anymore. Yeah, I've lost 2 or 3 people in the last year or so.
It's hard, isn't it?
Oh, it's
I feel like
you don't think you're going to wake up the next morning and they're not going to be there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, well, the Sue one was really a shock because that was a car wreck, so it was very sudden and very unexpected. With Bev, I had about a year. You know, I knew going into it about a year. You know, earlier this year, that she had been diagnosed with cancer. She didn't want to know how long she had to live, but they told me a year. And then she literally went down like the next month, you know, just boom. And so it's really tough when we lose. And we've, like we were saying, there's so many awesome musicians in this town. We've lost a ton. I mean, it's just been one hit after another since, you know, as long as I can think of. You know, it's always somebody, it seems like. But one thing I do love about the Louisville community and the players here is they are like a family, you know, and they will come together for a great cause and help raise money for their musicians. And, you know, we try to take care of our musicians as much as possible.
Yeah, everybody, it's a big family here.
Yeah, and I often wonder, just because I've been in and out of Nashville for a while, but probably not as long as you have, you know, I wonder, is Nashville the same way when it comes to that family life? Because it doesn't seem that way.
I don't know,
it seems more competitive, I will say there.
Everybody's working their stuff. Any of the young people are. When I was a younger person, I was down there. 2 or 3 of my other friends that were friends that I'd moved down there to try and be part of what scene they had going on. They'd been there longer, and they were complaining about the fact that, you know, you couldn't really just sort of have a cookout, because if you had a cookout, everybody wanted to know who was going to be at the cookout so they could be networking, see if they could find somebody to write with, or if there was going to be a producer there, or maybe there's going to be an engineer that can get me to the producer.
Yeah. Kind of seems almost LA-ish as well.
There was a whole lot of that going on. I mean, I know plenty of folks down there that have sort of a family thing, but there is a whole lot of networking going on. And if you're trying to be an artist, perhaps, or being a session guy, you know, and you've got something that you feel is specific to what's going on right then, I can see how you might want to really be hyping yourself and trying to get in the loop as quick as you could before your time in the sun had gone
no
away.
kidding. Yeah. You know, and another thing that I find it so different about Nashville versus Louisville, it always seems like to me the Nashville artists always want to try to play Louisville, but they can't break in it for some reason. They're always trying to. Louisville does have its own little niche. It's totally different than down there. Also, Louisville pays their musicians, maybe not as great as they should, but we at least pay them. In Nashville, as far as I understand, hardly anybody on Broadway gets paid anything because they're all wanting to do it to make it.
Yeah, that all sort of came. I haven't been down there in ages and ages, but that seemed to pop up after my times down there.
Yeah, and I've heard that Austin is basically the same kind of. It's like a new Nashville where it's like a hub where all the musicians go to try to break in. But because there are so many,
it used to
everybody's
be
playing for free
you
and
know?
stuff.
I used to go to Austin pretty regular, and it was a more laid-back scene. I'm sure it's probably...
Yeah. They've got that big South by Southwest down there. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, the scenes are so different, and it always fascinates me when you travel to a different space and you see, you know, what's going on in Cincinnati scene versus what's going on in Louisville scene, Nashville scene, and so forth.
Yeah, I don't know. Whenever I started playing, I just really started playing because I liked the way music sounded, and it was sort of a personal challenge to try and figure out how to play something. And
yeah,
it's good to get out and play shows and everything, but my idea never was to, you know,
be
the front man.
Yeah, I see that.
Be the hot front man in the band. I ain't got the hairline for that.
That's funny.
Or the figure, but I like playing music and playing music with people. And
me too, yeah.
As I was pointing out to somebody one night at a bar that was complaining that they weren't getting to play the kind of venues that they used to play and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, you know, man, if you sort of go back to what got you started in the first place, you really just wanted to make music, and you can make music anywhere you want at any time, you know?
That's true. You know, I feel like as a drummer, I'm an accompanist, obviously. Yeah. I can't just go out and play a gig by myself. Be really hard, at least, unless I'm sitting on buckets on the side of the street, you know. But yeah, I've gone through ups and downs. You know, obviously I was in music because I loved it, and I wouldn't be trucking around 300 pounds of equipment if I didn't. Yeah. As a female, you know, it's been very hard on my body physically, and I've got a little bit of nerve damage going on in my hand, so I kind of took some time off. I could teach without really using it, but man, when I hit that snare drum, sometimes it's like being cattle prodded. Yeah. Nerve-wise, and it's just so weird. It's kind of like a shock to the soul, you know. But yeah, I've gone through ups and downs a lot in the past several years. You know, there was a time where music did not make me happy, you know, and then I kind of stepped back and was like, you know, what am I doing? You know, why am I doing this? I guess is the bigger question. And then there were times that it made me completely happy, you know, and so I kind of have had this journey of ups and downs with it. Sometimes wanting to give it up, you know, for good and go the 9-to-5 route and get a family and do that thing. You know, because at 41, you don't want to look back and go, oh, man, I missed out on all of that because I was pursuing music. But at the same time, I feel like it's very therapeutic, too. I feel like I use music for therapy for myself. You know, it makes me happy a lot of times, so I just love to play because it's more of a mental boost, I guess, or an emotional boost more than anything for me. I do not enjoy the physical aspect of like setup and tear down and all that stuff. I don't think any of us do.
Yeah, I'm really tired of hauling PA around. And
I feel you. Yeah.
Heavy amplifiers.
Yeah. And back in the day, I can only imagine, because nowadays we've got light PAs.
Yeah.
Back then, you know, if you wanted a sub, it's in the back of a huge pickup truck or something.
Keyboards, yeah. It's let's see, the little rock band I used to play in, because I played in the band at high school, I was able to use their bass rig. Yeah. Which was a Gibson EBO bass, and then, if you're not a gearhead, Ampeg was an American amplifier company, and they made what is thought of as being the pinnacle of the electric bass rock rig called an SVT, which had two cabinets that had 8 10-inch speakers in each cabinet. Wow. And a gigantic head that went on top of it that was about the size of, a microwave oven, a large one, but it weighed about 300 pounds. Yeah. But that was what my bass rig was. Wow. In the little rock band, as well as the keyboard guy had a Leslie cabinet. Yeah. Oh, wow, the Leslie cabinet. A Leslie cabinet. Aren't those the special ones that go around and round? Yeah, they go round and round, but they weigh about as much as a Volkswagen Beetle. I'm sure, yeah. Wow, that's nuts, man. Yeah, and did you have a van for that, or what? A U-Haul, maybe? No, we had a couple of station wagons. We'd throw a bunch of stuff in the station wagons, and I don't know how we got from point A to point B. It's all a blur. Yeah.
Man, I bet you've seen some great parties in your day and played some great, cool gigs.
I've had some good times.
Do you have, say, like a top 5 gigs of all times that are just so memorable that you just, you love? You're top so thankful.
5. Well, I've had interesting things. I've had some neat things that I've been able to do, and that are really nice. The one thing that sort of put everything in perspective for me concerning my particular music situation was there for a little bit I was doing sub work for people out of Nashville, label artists that were trying to get a band together, and they didn't really have enough stuff going on, and I was working with some guys that were a rhythm section. And I went to Canada to do a little tour with these people. Their single was really big, and they were playing the time slot right before George Strait at this great, big, gigantic country music festival in Canada. There was
cool.
80,000 people there, and they had the jumbotrons and everything, and I was playing guitar. And we went out and did our set, and I took a guitar solo, and I sort of looked over to the right, and there I was, like 12 stories high on the jumbotron.
Right. And,
it's a massive crowd, and we're going, George Strait was the headliner, and we were right before George Strait. Had a good set and did everything, and they dropped me off at the airport in Detroit because they were picking up somebody else to play the rest of their tour. And I flew back into Louisville, and I took a nap, and I got up the next day, and I played for a bunch of people from a nursing home at Hogan's Fountain that were all drugged up on stuff and passing out. There was like 25 people, though.
Yeah.
And I still had to play a show, so I went from like almost being Keith
Thousands,
Richards
right,
to playing for a bunch of sick people that were asleep.
Yeah, isn't that the music scene is so interesting? Isn't
it? It's the yin and the yang.
I love to tell this story. I got hired from U of L not too long ago, actually, and they said we need a drummer for something, and they said the gig's at the Palace, and I was like, sweet. I've never played the Palace, but that's awesome. I would love to get to play the Palace. So they're like, we'll send you the music, and you can learn it. I had no idea what the gig was. And turns out they send me the email of songs, and it's Spice Girls music. So I thought it was a joke. I was like, this has to be, they sent me the wrong thing, right? No, it turned out I was playing Spice Girls music at the Palace, and it was sold out. It was a sold-out crowd for some big U of L Freiburger, some kind of something that they do annually.
Yeah.
And I had never been on that stage, and I was slightly nervous. I don't usually get nervous.
That's a cool stage. I've played there.
Yeah, and I could hear the noise before they brought the curtain up, and they opened up that curtain. It was like not a seat in the house, and I thought, never in a million years did I think I would be on stage at the Palace playing Spice Girls music, and it was like 60 sorority girls like dancing. Right. So I was like, this is, bizarre gigs. And it's crazy how you can go from, sold out theaters and stuff like you're talking about, and then come back and play to a room of 5 people.
We had a guy book the Hog Operation. We played he and his wife's, they got married. They eloped and got married and didn't tell anybody about it. And then they had a barbecue to announce the fact that they had gotten married to like 20 of their friends, you know. 10 different couples of people. Big deal out at their house, out in nice end of town, and had nice food, nice bar, everything. The bride got up and sang some songs with us. And the guy called me, I don't know, it was about a year later, and booked us again. It was their anniversary. And we went and we played that gig, and then they announced they were getting a divorce.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's an interesting gig, too.
Which took...
Wait, they had a party to announce they're getting a divorce?
Yeah, it was like, well, all you folks here, you're so very dear to us, and you were here with us when we want you to be here. But then it gets even weirder, because he called me, I don't know, the next year.
Oh, no, you're going to play for his new wife or something?
He booked a party. He booked us to come play a party.
Yeah.
And he said, bring some people if you want to, because we're going to have plenty of food and everything. So, if you want to bring some people, tell some people about it, which, we play events all the time. And you know how it is when you're playing somebody's cocktail thing
you don't
or
want to
a
invite
dinner.
people, right?
You don't bring people with you because, you're kind of the potted palm. You're part of the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
So we showed up. And we were supposed to be bringing guests, It was, the four of us in the Hog Operation.
Yeah.
His daughter's fiance, and some dude he'd met at the golf course that morning. And he had the entire catering crew that he always hired to come, 2 bartenders, 2 bar stations.
Yeah.
And he had some dude there that was going to grill ribs.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 75 pounds of ribs.
Yeah.
And that one was really weird. Because, because we played, and then he said, take a break, we'll all eat. And, it was...
Yeah, it's bizarre, man. Some of the gigs that musicians land... Man, I've had some great interviews. Like I said, Jeff Jarboe was in McAllister. Jeff McAllister was in Marvin Maxwell, obviously Sherry Edwards. We just had a slew of people, and they always tell me about their most bizarre gigs and or most fun gigs. And it's really interesting the life that musicians get to lead. The things that we get to see on a daily. I remember, there were a few times where I was in fear of my life when I was out on tour with Kelly Ritchie. We would be in the middle of somewhere like North Dakota.
Yeah.
We played some of the bigger cities like Fargo and Bismarck, but we would also play these little podunk venues
it's a long way from anything out there.
And you don't know anybody. Yeah. And out of the 3 that was on tour, I was the most masculine one. So I was like, I can't depend on these people to take care of me if something goes down. But there were places we were playing, and I wish I could remember the name of the city. It was some little small city in North Dakota, almost up near the Canadian border, toward the Montana side, And they would tell us as soon as we pulled in, they would say, now there are rules, You can't leave the bar, which was kind of bizarre, and you can't go to any other venue, around here. We're like, okay. Turns out like it was a Wild Wild West shootout over some oil fields and stuff.
Yeah.
And if they didn't know you, they would shoot you.
They thought you might be somebody that was meddling in their business.
I guess so. And so either way, in between sets, I'm locking myself in the van, hiding.
we played years ago. I was playing with some guys from over around Ashland, Kentucky, and we were playing up in Ohio, along the Ohio River there, and we played a bar in Gallipolis, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And they had Bluegrass Night. We were playing, and there was a bunch of bikers in there.
Yeah.
They're all flying their colors, and then a bunch of other bikers came in that were flying their colors, and it wasn't the same bikers.
Oh no.
And
it was like a biker
I thought
brawl.
there was going to be a bad problem, and one of the people could see that we were concerned, and they came up and said, "No, it's all okay. We're having a parley. We're talking. It's neutral ground. Nothing's going on." So they all were fine, and they all had a good time, and they listened to music, and they eventually all left, and we were tearing down the PA, and getting ready to load out. Got paid, and some guy comes in from the parking lot and walks up to the guy that's paying me and says, "Man, Bobby's out there with a shotgun saying he's going to kill Davey because Davey shorted him on a bag of weed. Can you come out here and talk some sense into him?"
I love it.
And the guy says, "Man, y'all just stay in here for a minute. Don't take anything outside. Let me go get this taken care of." And he came back about 15 minits later and said, "Man, them guys, they're just idiots."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the guy shotgun. I did see a thing up in Pikeville. There used to be a place called Marlowe's Country Palace, Marlowe Tackett. Did you ever play up there, Ben?
Never.
Well, it used to be dry up there. I think it's wet now. And Marlowe had this great big facility that, he had ladies' night on Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. So everybody would bring their gal out, or gals would go out. But the trick about Marlowe's was everything was even money. They sold setups to make you a drink. You could bring your own liquor. They
Wow.
sold dinner, but and the cover charge was $5 or $10, and a soda was $5, and dinner was $20 or $30 or $40.
You just never knew.
So, well, no, it was also they didn't have to make change.
Oh, okay. Everything was even numbers.
Everything was even numbers. So that was interesting, and
that is interesting.
And the stage was really high up off the floor, and it had a big dance floor, and they had national country acts come in and play. Exile would play.
Yeah.
They'd have on the show. But Wednesday night was ladies' night, and we were up there alternating sets with the house band doing bluegrass music because they liked bluegrass music, and people would get out there and dance because we were doing some bluegrass country covers and stuff. They had a big wall safe in the office that was just full of stacks of money. I remember that because we had to use that for our dressing room once.
Yeah.
But we were up there playing, and it's ladies' night, and this cat comes in wearing a duster coat, and he sashays across the dance floor and gets up behind this guy and gal that are dancing, and he pulls a shotgun out from under his coat.
Oh, wow.
And I'm watching all this happen, and before he could get it shouldered, one of the bouncers came up behind him and hit him in the head with a blackjack.
Oh, wow.
And another guy grabbed the shotgun from him,
Uh-huh.
and two other guys were standing there, and they caught him by the arms when he fell back from getting hit in the head with the blackjack. And the people dancing never saw any of it happen, and they drug him out the back door. It was like a ballet.
And you're playing during
We
this?
were playing, yeah, and they told us, just like out of a movie script that, sometimes they had rough characters, and if there was something going on, unless we were being shot at, just keep playing and don't draw attention to it.
Well, I love that. Unless you're being shot at, don't move.
Yeah, his
don't pay attention.
His club manager told us that, but
Wow.
the fella, it was.
What era was this?
That would have been 70s, probably.
Yeah.
77,
Man, it's always
78,
fascinating to me when
79.
you're up there playing music, because obviously you don't speak unless you're singing.
Yeah.
And you're just observing,
Right.
basically. And the things that we observe are really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, somewhere up in Pennsylvania, we went to some biker bar. And it always scares me a little bit to play the bike. I like bikers.
Yeah,
I grew up with them. I've got a lot in my family. But at the same time, some of the venues can be a little rough, and I come from redneck land and was trying to get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I avoid the South End sometimes. It's a little red for my taste because I come from that, But we would be up in Pennsylvania, like playing somewhere. And first off, when you go onto the premises, it's like if you lose cell phone service, that's slightly scary, number one.
Right.
And two, you pull in and there's all these rebel flags everywhere, and that's slightly scary to me, just because. And, we would be on stage, people taking off their clothes, there's just things being passed around everywhere. And like you said, people were carrying everywhere. You just know that these people and drinking and partying, anything goes awry, it could be a very bad situation, and thank God, most usually nothing too crazy happens.
Because most of the time everybody's there to have a good time. And generally as long as everybody stays happy.
Yeah. Yes.
And there's not any sort of domestic squabbles. You're usually in pretty good shape.
Yeah. The one thing that always worries about me, and we were talking about this, and cutting out alcohol as a musician, because we're fed that all the time. And we're in and out of bars a lot. And that's just, for me personally, I'm at a level where it's like I really don't want to play a lot of bars anymore. Yeah. I'm just tired of that scene, and I'm working on my sobriety. So, just to be surrounded by it, I could go to a bar and just sit there and have a water or a Diet Coke and be fine and socialize, because I love to socialize in bars and stuff like that. I always have. But yeah, it's really hard when you're trying to avoid that and then you're around it. But alcohol, I've noticed, just from my personal perspective, can tend to make people angry sometimes. Yeah. It's not like weed, There's a meme out there that says 5 drunk guys will start a fight, but 5 stoned guys will start a band. And it's the truth. It's the truth. It's something way more groovy and just more peaceful about it than alcohol. And there is... I have seen alcohol completely change people.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm kind of one of those too. I don't, and that's what I don't like about it is, when you drink, sometimes you become something else. It depends on the liquor,
Yep.
And so I think anytime you mix that with a situation like we're talking about with gigs and stuff, it could be a disaster.
Yep.
And I've had a few of those myself. So
Yep.
Yeah. So that's wild, man. And so you've played pretty much have you ever gotten to play Bob Mackey up near Newport, Kentucky?
No, of all the places, Johnny and I played a gig up in at Rabbit Hash, and we were talking about Bobby Mackey's and that we hadn't played there.
Is that still around? Because that's an old country venue, isn't it?
Yeah, no, he's still doing it. He has ghost tours. They've got supposedly a ghost in there, so they've got a band that's playing. They're doing it, I guess, 6 nights a week, and then he's running ghost tours, so people show up and they get a herd of people to take upstairs and downstairs.
Yeah, I heard all kinds of crazy stories about that venue, and a lot of the musicians that have played there have said that they've had some very strange, odd experiences there, and that's why I was wondering if you had played there.
I haven't played there, but I have had some weird sort of
ghosty things
happen. We for a spell when I was playing with the Dillards, we'd go to the east and we'd go to the west, and coming down from Northern California towards LA, there's a stretch of road they call the Grapevine. Mm-hmm. And it was my turn to drive the Grapevine, and it was broad daylight. There's a bunch of traffic, and I was driving our bus thing, and we're coming down the hill, and there's a guy standing over on the edge of the road, just going crazy, waving his arms and going nuts and everything. And, we're driving interstate speed. We go on by, and Dean Webb, the mandolin player, was riding shotgun, and he didn't say anything about it, so I didn't think anything about it.
Yeah.
We go on further down, about 3/4 a mile, same dude standing on the edge of the road, going crazy, waving his arms and everything. And as we get up there, I say, Dean, did you see that guy? He goes, see what?
Was he being serious or no?
I said, the guy on the side of the road. He goes, oh, no, only the person driving gets to see him. I've seen him. Yeah, he's been out there for years. Mm-hmm. And we went on down. Apparently, he was trying to keep people from having a wreck or something, because there'd been a bad wreck at one point ages ago.
So he just hung out and flailed his arms at people?
Well, he's a ghost.
Oh, I see. Oh,
he's a ghost because he reappeared.
Maybe he's just stuck in that.
He's stuck, yeah. Well, he reappeared to me 2 more times before we got out of his territory, and Dean explained to me that he had seen him before too, but only when he was driving. That was why Dean said, no, you only get to see him when you're driving. He only appears to the driver.
That's interesting.
And we were doing it another time, and one of the other guys, I was driving the same stretch, and Mitch Jane, our bass player, was sitting there, and we went by him, and I said, so there was the guy waving his arms. He goes, oh, you saw the guy waving his arms?
It must be like a common thing, huh?
I said, yeah, I saw him. I saw him the last time I was driving this stretch. He goes, oh, yeah, he only appears to you if you're the driver. That's the only person that can see him.
Ooh, I'm going to have to check that out. I love all that stuff. I totally believe in spirits, and I do believe that sometimes when people pass that they're not still physically here, but I definitely think spiritually they're still around us. And I see signs of that on a daily of people I've lost, Just the other day, I was just, I was like, man, I wish I had, it's just something as simple as I wish I had a wristband that was gray or something like that. And I just moved into this place, and I knew everything was clean because I just cleaned it.
Yeah.
And I go to my garage, and there laying in the middle of the floor is a gray wristband. And it was from Bev. It said on the side, Bev beats cancer. And I was like, that was weird. Just little things like that I pay attention to, little synchronicities.
Right.
To me, physically, I don't see spirits, but it almost looks like, when you see oil from a distance or gas coming up off the ground,
right,
and you can't really see the gas, but you can kind of see through it and kind of see that there's some kind of, that's what it is like to me. It's almost like the spiritual weird energy, that kind of, and I don't understand it, but I definitely believe in that, and I've seen signs of it my whole life.
There's stuff out there. I think there's good and there's bad. I'm not running any of it. I just
me either.
Just
try to keep them happy.
Just try to stay out of the way of it.
Yeah, man, I had this crazy dream the other night, right after my friend passed, that she came and sat on the edge of my bed, and I physically felt the bed like make an indent.
Yeah, she may have been there.
I think she was. I totally believe she was, because it scared me at first, and then I was like, oh, don't be scared. There's nothing here.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, she was almost coming to me in a dream, like talking to me and telling me to watch over certain people and telling me that she had made it to the other side, kind of thing. And she had her little guitar and her fedora hat, and her dog was there, and it was very surreal, and it was literally like I woke up out of a dream and at 4:30 in the morning when this happened. So I don't know, I just pay attention to stuff like that, and I do totally believe that. I definitely believe in a higher power. I believe that sometimes people can get stuck here, I feel like.
Yep.
And maybe that's what maybe he's just the dude on the side that is trying to, although flailing arms seems like it would be more of a distraction to cause a wreck than to avoid it. Right?
You would think.
Yeah. There used to be all these, little, of course, where I'm from is the country, so late at night it's very dark and you see a lot of stars, and, you can walk for miles in a farmland area, cornfield or whatever, and not see anybody, but there was always, creepy stories and all that stuff like that. And we would always hang out in graveyards, And when we skipped school, we had to go to caves because it's so small. One person sees you and your mom knows and everybody else. So we would, where I'm from, there's a lot of cave systems.
Right.
And we would go to caves and hang out, just to skip school so nobody would see us.
I can't imagine Jen Yates skipping school.
You can't?
No.
I actually was a really good student. I really was. I made pretty much all A's and B's, but I was a pretty rebellious, teenager,
No.
I've got enough of my dad in me. Mom was always the good one. Dad was always like the outlaw rebel. You know what I mean? And I come from a bunch of roughnecks, 6 generations of oil well drillers, and they, they're big old, they're short and stocky, but they're strong, and my family, the Yates side, they're pretty much, my great-grandfather helped drill the first oil well in the state of Kentucky, as well as ran a water line business, and they pretty much have drilled most all of these, the water lines for most, even up here in Louisville. We were from South Central Kentucky down in
They
Metcalf.
used to drill for a whole lot of oil down there in Adair County. And
they still do. There's
Russell County and
my dad, I forget how many counties he was in control of, but before he retired, he was working for the state as an oil and gas inspector. So you had to get your permits through him as how far you could drill down.
Sure.
And of course, when I was a kid, I used to love to go with him on the oil fields, and he'd let me pull the knobs and the levers, and he had a big ditch witch, and I'd get to ride it and get down in the trenches and get dirty. I was always like an outdoorsy kind of kid. He, there's a lot of millionaires down in that area, and what cracks me up is you wouldn't know it.
You wouldn't know
because
they're all wearing bib overalls.
And they won't go get a haircut in a year, although they've got millions in the bank, and they drilled for oil right in the front of their house. Some of them had trailers and just drilled, took a whim and was like, I'm going to drill for oil, and then hit it. It's pretty amazing. But the Yateses are 6 generations, maybe 7 generations now deep of oil and water well drillers. In fact, my grandmother, Granny Dimple, the creative one, she was the librarian, and she traced our family roots back as far as she could, about to the 1200s, I think. And then she wrote a book for all of the grandkids and the kids, and then left them to us so that we could trace our history back. And there are drawings in there that my great-grandfather had done of, we had the mule-powered systems beforehand, but they pretty much helped design the first oil rigs that you could actually drill with. And I wish they had the patents on that, because and I think they would be very disappointed if they were living today, and seeing what was going on with the world concerning oil, because they were a little bit opposite thinking, I think, than what's out there today. And the Halliburtons and all that stuff. As far as I understand, my grandfather wasn't a big fan of them. But I wish he would have, patented that, because as far as drilling and helping people get running water in their homes and bathrooms and stuff like that we use for showers and things, they did a lot concerning that. And I always loved to be in the shop and, be around all that stuff. The roughnecks, I call them. Yeah. The oil fields are no joke. Yeah. It's tough work.
Serious business. You get into trouble if something goes wrong there.
Oh, easy. Yeah, easy.
Things start blowing up and catching on fire.
I always heard this really funny story. You'll probably appreciate it. Somewhere, I think, around Metcalfe County or Glasgow, down there where Greg Martin Land is. I call it Greg Martin Land. That when they first hit oil, they had been drilling right beside the river, like a creek. It may have been Lake Cumberland. I'm not for sure exactly which waterway it was. But they hit oil for the first time. They didn't know what it was. And so it kind of geysered up, and it caught on fire. And it was floating down the river on fire. And they thought that they literally hit hell. Yeah. That's how crazy it was, because they didn't know what it was back then, you know. And growing up, I would pull into my grandparents' house, and they had a gas pump right there, right in their driveway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how everybody could put gas in their work truck. They used to have... They had a hand pump at my mom's place because they gas up the trucks, gas up the tractors, whatever.
Yeah, it was always wild. But even more than drilling, Granny Dimple and that whole side, they were more interested in music. Were you ever like in marching band or anything like that? Were you ever trained growing up?
Well, I was in the marching band. And I was in the Louisville Youth Orchestra for a little bit.
Cool. And was that on trumpet or?
That was on the French horn. I migrated to the French horn somewhere.
Oh, the French horn is a beautiful instrument. I really love the tonality of a French horn.
They're a beautiful, beautiful sound.
Yes. And that's the one where you kind of put your fist in it.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of the fist in the French horn? Well, I've always wondered. Is it like a mute?
You can sort of change the timbre of what you're playing by angling your hand. You don't really put your fist in. You sort of put your hand in flat, but you can angle
that's
it around
fascinating to me. I had no idea you played French horn. So, and Louisville Youth Orchestra, that is still going on.
Yeah.
And I hear it's an amazing program for young people.
It gets a whole lot of people interested in music. And gives them false hope in being able to be a musician.
Right, I know. Sometimes when I'm teaching these kids, I say this a lot, slightly, because we're creating little Frankensteins here, and I've got a lot of little kids from the Louisville Leopards or whatever they do. And, and that's another reason I love Louisville is we have so many performing arts schools here. I mean, literally, when I moved to Louisville, I was very confused because where I'm from, there was one school and it was public. There was no such thing as a Catholic school or a private school or separating the genders or, any of that stuff that they do. So when I moved here, everybody was like, what high school, what school did you go to? Well, I thought they were talking, I was like Western Kentucky.
Right.
Like, I thought they were talking about college.
No, they want to know which high school you went.
And then it took me a while to figure that out. And then, the longer I've stayed around, I totally get it. I see all these schools and they're all competing against each other and whatnot.
Yeah.
I do love Louisville because it is so creative. And we have the Y passes and the Lincoln Performing, the elementary and the Western Middle School and all those awesome schools that we have here. But yeah, it was just it was just so different from where I come from to coming here. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a gay bar until I got to Louisville. I was that sheltered pretty much. I was running in the cornfields, like you said, down in the trenches, not paying attention. But where I'm from, the one thing that I loved about Adair County is they cared more about the music there than they did the sports.
Yeah.
Adair County had not won anything in sports. They
used to have, when I was a kid, they had a big marching band.
They still do.
I remember competing against them out at the fairgrounds. And
well, where I'm
from, 2 or 3 different places. Yeah, they had a great big marching band.
And they still do. It's a tradition where I'm from. So my dad was in the marching band, and if your parents were in the marching band, they wanted you to be in the marching band and your kids to be in the marching band.
Had the flag corps and the whole bit.
Yeah. And so when I was there, and I think they rank up there with like Lafayette as one of the most winningest state championship bands in the country. And they're still winning. They won last year. So, kudos to my hometown for that one thing. Also where Mike Webb is from, where he went to school. There's a lot of people who went to Adair County that are now band directors for other counties and other, they're all tied in.
Yep.
It's crazy. But, I always loved marching band. I felt like it set like a really good...
This is great weather
forefront.
for marching band right here. You'd be at band camp so you could learn your stuff.
Yeah.
Man, you'd be out there sweating.
Sweating, that's right.
Sweating. You're not picking your leg up high enough. Ankle
High
to
mark
the
time.
knee.
High
Ankle,
mark time, that's right, yeah.
ankle to the knee.
You do learn all
Okay.
the military about face and all those, movements. I was fortunate enough to be on the pit, so
Yeah.
I did like timpani and marimbas and
Right.
drum set and break drums on cars and all kinds
Yeah.
of really cool things.
Yeah.
But what kills me about marching band is, yes, you start in the dead heat of winter, dead heat of summer,
Yeah.
and then by the time you're competing for state championships,
Yeah, you're getting frostbite.
right.
Yeah.
There was one time where I remember having to go on, and it was like an ice storm.
Yeah.
And they don't cancel for that stuff.
No.
So you're out there trying to play drums that have been rained on.
Yeah.
They're wet, the horns, and everybody's
Yeah.
trying to stay in tune. And
Everybody's pads are falling off of their woodwinds.
exactly, the flags are knocking each other out.
Right.
Yeah, but I always really do. I always try to get my students to go into some sort of band, some sort of marching band. The camaraderie.
Yeah.
That you learn, and it taught me Eyes with Pride. It taught me a lot about just what was to come, and we did compete, but at the same time, it's not as competitive as sports.
Yeah.
Where I feel like you're teaching your kids to go out here and beat somebody up over
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Yes, you have
It's-
good sportsmanship, but it's not going to teach them as much as
Yeah.
music will.
Yep. No, I had a good time in marching band. Good bunch of folks.
Yeah. And ever study after that, or you just kept playing music?
So let's see. I started college a couple of times, and I didn't make it through because something would come up, and it was going to be a good gig, and college was going to be totally there.
Yeah.
I think the first go round, I was going to Western, and I ended up.
The Hilltopper?
Yeah.
All right, Hilltoppers represent.
I ended up turning up some sort of gig. I can't remember. One of the guys that I'd been playing a little bit with dreamed up something to go Colorado for ski season, or what was it? I can't remember. Anyway, it sounded like a good idea at the time.
Yeah. And was it?
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
I had a good time. Sure, I made a little bit of money.
Yeah.
I've had a good time. I've
Yeah.
had a good time. I don't think I've hurt anybody. I don't think I've hurt myself too much.
Yeah.
I don't owe anybody any money, so it's
That's good. That's always a good place to be in.
probably use a new car, but all my fingers are working. Still got all my teeth.
And hey, you can still play music like a
it's-
pro, man.
It's all been okay.
Yeah, and you've traveled. I mean, you've gotten
Yeah.
to see the world doing stuff. Can you imagine all the stuff you wouldn't have if you didn't have music in your life?
The banjo has been very good to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm
been
jealous
very
that
good
you
to
just
me.
get to carry a banjo. I know you're carrying PA and stuff, but I'm like, I would rather carry a banjo than
If I
drum
had
set.
it to do over again, maybe it would be a mandolin because they're even lighter.
Oh yeah,
You
or
know?
a piccolo,
Yeah.
a piccolo
Yeah.
flute.
Yeah.
I always say, why did I? Well, first off, I didn't pick the drums; they picked me. I
Yes,
feel like
exactly.
because as soon as I came out of the womb, I was on a set, and I don't remember any memory at all without a drum set around, in my life.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, I should have picked something a little bit less to carry. Like you talk about, you have to have a station wagon or a van
Oh,
to
yeah.
carry this stuff around. Yeah, and it is. I mean, my drum box alone that just has the stands is like 300
I was
pounds.
going to say that has to be several hundreds of pounds.
Yeah, and as I've gotten older, like most drummers do that still gig, my sets have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. In fact, that's why.
Remember when you were young and you wanted that whole rack of toms,
That
and
Neil
I
Peart
want
kit.
3 floor toms, and
Yeah.
okay, a double kick. I gotta have a double kick.
Yeah, exactly. No, I never was into all that. Now, my dad, growing up, the drum room, we had a drum room that was right near my bedroom. It was like a 10 or 13 piece kit. I mean, it was a huge kit. But yeah, playing out, I think if you're going to be realistic, unless you're on some kind of pro level where they're.
There's not that
You know.
there's not that many places to back to when we were talking about venues. I mean, there's just not any places that are really set up for loud music where
No.
you could really even take a gigantic
Yeah,
sort of really
kit.
neat kit to play, and
Right.
guitar players bring out a couple of 412 cabinets. It's hard to find any place that you could unleash that beast
Yeah, I agree.
this day and age.
I agree. Consistently for sure. And the drummers are always in some kind of weird corner or somewhere pressed up against the glass in their face.
You have the plexiglass cage around you.
Yes, yeah. I always love the plexiglass is always... Drummers hate that thing, but I kind of like it. I don't mind it.
It probably keeps part of the guitar noise and the bass noise out away from you, too.
Well, for me, I had to do it at Actors Theater for Girlfriend. I've had to do it at a couple like church venues, and I can't think of everything that I've done with the plexi. Yeah. But most of the theater projects I've done have had plexi around me. Yeah. But that allows the drummer to be able to play normally, and not have to. I mean, obviously, you want to watch your dynamics and stuff like that. They're super important. But you can really open it up when you're behind a plexi, and you don't have to worry about, my sound affecting you that's standing in front of me and whatnot. So I kind of like it for that reason. And I don't mind the in-ears because I really like to listen through the in-ears, but it just depends on the venue and what you're doing. But if you notice a lot of those church gigs, though, if they have drummers, they'll always have that plexi.
Either plexi or they're using one of those silly Roland kits that...
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. I was going to say that's why I got into electronics is because... Not that I'm, I love to incorporate electronics into my acoustic kit, but at the same time, gosh, it's so much easier to carry. Yeah. It's like a box this big with some pads. It's that easy. But obviously, I love the sound of acoustic kits.
I'm sure they don't feel the same when you hit them.
Yeah.
And that's...
Yeah, I get that question a lot with students. Like, parents always want to buy the electronics because they don't want to hear the drum set in their house. And there's pros and cons. One is they definitely don't feel the same, hitting an electronic pad is like hitting a drum pad, a practice pad.
It doesn't have the same sort of bounce.
No, and
you don't really learn where to hit it to get the tone.
Correct, you've got different stuff. But on a pro note, instead of a snare drum making 2 or 3 sounds, you can program it to make 10,000 sounds. It just depends on what you want. So I've seen some bands that were great with electronic kit players, and it always blows my mind because I feel like I'm just uncomfortable if I play only an electric kit. It seems weird to me. Yeah. You go to kick the kick drum and you're not getting that thump. You have to hear it through your monitors. But for a kid, I guess, that's growing up that, is in an apartment. And in fact, that's why I kind of started messing with the electronics. I always loved electronics because I was an 80s kid, obviously. Had the big Roland square octagon, electronic and all kinds of really cool. My dad was kind of a techie. So I was always in the shop, like playing with electronics and stuff. And Phil Collins was really big, and all those great drummers that used those things back in the 80s. And have you ever had to cover like 80s music? It's incredibly...
A little bit.
Yeah. Notice how far and few between it is that people that cover that style because those electronics were starting to come in the forefront. Right. And unless you can emulate that live, it's incredibly hard
to pull it off. Yeah, back when it was happening, there was a lot of people around town that were.
I bet like Toy Tiger days, the 80s and all that.
Jeff McAllister was in on a bunch of that stuff. Where he was using funny electronic drums for a minute.
Yeah. I mean, I love them, but I also like them incorporated into an actual kit. I don't know. That's just me. But I do totally get it when, the parents say, well, we really want something that we don't have to hear. Yeah. I get that. If you're just starting out, I don't think it's that bad of an idea.
They just ought to build the kid a little shed in the back.
Yeah, exactly. Or what I always say is get one of those little Questlove kits, the one with the kick drums that are like 12 inches or 14 inches. I play one of those. They're like a bebop kit, like a cocktail kit. And I really love those things. If you mic them, they sound like a big kit, even though they look like a toy kit. But also they fit in my front seat. And they're not a lot of work to carry around, which we love.
I'm trying to remember who it was. We had somebody bring one of those kits out to do some sort of Johnny Berry thing once. I can't remember who it was, though. It sounded fine once you mic'd it up.
Yeah, you're lucky because you're a string player. You can literally get away without, like, percussion kind of stuff, I always love that about bluegrass artists. They can literally just walk on stage with their instruments, play, and then boom, go off,
I sort of got that worked out with my electric guitar rig, too. I can generally have all my cables wrapped and everything put away before the drummers made it all the way back from getting their cases.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite instrument since you do play a lot of different things?
I just like to play, honestly. I really do. If we're playing music and I'm getting to play with some people, I'm glad to play pretty much anything.
Pretty much any style.
Let me play.
Yeah.
just happy to play. I like music.
Yeah. I love your outlook on that. I'm going to try to adopt that for myself and just be like, you know what? Because you're right. When you get frustrated with it, you kind of have to go back to when you started. Yeah. Why did I start this? Why was I in it for this reason? You know what I mean? And then you look back and you're like, oh, yeah, I was in it because I loved it, you know, and it made me happy or whatever it does. Again, for me, it's therapy almost. It's like if I don't play, then I feel like I might go crazy.
Sure.
Just because I don't have a family to like fall back on or anything else but music. So it's like the one thing that's kept me alive, I feel like.
I get up every morning somewhere between 6 and 6:30, and I mostly play the banjo in the morning. I wake up and I play the banjo till I leave to go to work. 2 or 3 hours just trying to make a pleasant sound. It's hard when you have a banjo.
I was going to say,
does the banjo have a pleasant sound? I don't know. But
I love me a banjo. Yeah.
I love the banjo too. But yeah, I generally mess around with the banjo in the morning. I've made time for it to do it in the morning.
Good for you, yeah.
I can get up and make some noise.
Well, and two, you know, as musicians, I think, and you've been very fortunate, you know, to be playing as long as you have. There's so many people that weren't granted that opportunity. You know, I just met a piano player the other day who, she's only 30 years old, and she's been playing since she was 10. She's really incredibly trained and great, and does all these theater things, teaches. But she had told me, you know, she was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, which I was not familiar with until I started studying up on it. And you know, after I read that, I was like, wow, she could lose her limbs any time now. Like, you just don't know when you're not going to be able to play. So, for you to continue to play, even though you're a pro, for you to get up every morning and actually just sit around and pick, that's pretty awesome.
I try and learn stuff and work on things.
Yeah. Because I was like, do you think now
Lord knows I've forgotten all kinds of stuff.
I was gonna say, I don't think that you probably need to learn anything. Man.
Oh no, I try and learn stuff. I generally will get a piece of music out and do some reading.
Yeah.
And read it so that I play it on the banjo and work on different things.
It's cool about music because there's always a piece of music that you don't know out there. You know, there's always something to learn with music.
And I've found, though, that, you know, as I've gotten older, it takes a minute or two to get warmed up. And if I have to go play gigs with, you know, the band and I don't feel my hands aren't working right, or I feel they're not working right, it's very frustrating, and I don't have an enjoyable time going to play. So
yeah. I definitely like to warm up. I like to, if I can get 30 minutes to an hour in before I go play, I always feel like I play better.
Well, that's why I get up every morning and do it, because I was starting to feel frustrated and feel bad about going to play because I couldn't get my hands to do what my head was trying to tell it. And
is that just, do you have any kind of physical issues, or they just weren't warmed up, is what you're saying?
I hadn't been playing banjo a whole lot because I hadn't been playing banjo unless I went to play a gig. I'd be thinking about it, or I'd be playing the guitar, practicing the guitar. I just figured, as frustrating as it was that things weren't working the way I wanted them to,
understood,
practice.
I always try to tell my students, you know, I try to always make them read, no matter what. I always teach them how to read, because I was a late reader. I read early on, and I took piano lessons and played clarinet and saxophone and all this cool stuff. But I'd always been behind a drum set, so I read more clarinet music and more melody line music than I did percussion, because I didn't go into I went in pursuing drums, but I ended up playing clarinet, bass clarinet, and then in marching band, they would eventually put me on the kit and stuff. Yeah. So I didn't spend those years like reading drums like I should have. I really started focusing on it when I got hired at Mom's Music to teach for Marvin.
Right.
And I thought, well, I know enough, you know, reading wise to teach somebody else, but I needed to also have some lessons. So I took some lessons from Sam Harris. I don't know if you remember him. Yeah, his and I'm still great friends with his wife and his daughter and all that, and their family.
Nice folks.
Oh yeah, and Sam was just awesome. I mean, he really gave me a lot of pointers, and then he said, "You know what you're doing," you know. After, and I was like, "I do," you know, and he was like, "Yeah," you know, and so he kind of gave me some confidence. And I started taking musicals because I really love to read the written form of music. Yeah. It's fascinating to me that everything we hear can be written in a written form.
Yeah.
And it seems like more people struggle with that than almost anything else.
it's my friend Mike that plays in the Hog Operation. Mm-hmm. He has the Louisville Mandolin Orchestra, and I've gone to Spain and France with them for some international music festival things.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of different string ensembles there, large ones, 20, 30 people, and they would always, part of the event was everybody would get together for a big finale concert, and they'd have a guest conductor, and everybody would read the music.
Oh, yeah,
it was an orchestra gig, and it really, whenever somebody tells you that music is the universal language, and that makes you all feel warm and fuzzy, but everybody knows what forte is and pianissimo,
right?
Accelerando, and everybody follows the conductor and they count it off. So
yeah, exactly.
It truly is the universal written word.
Yes, it is. Well, too, another cool gig that I landed via Nancy Harris was the Legend of, it was the Symphony of the Goddesses, The Legend of Zelda. And it was an orchestra piece that was coming here for the Kentucky Center of the Arts. And they had a 70-piece orchestra. And I got hired in to play like percussion 2 or percussion 3. And I had never been in an orchestra that had metronomes in their ears.
Click, yeah.
We had a click in our ear for the whole show. And I mean, it was constant time signature changes and different speeds and, a very intense piece. And it was all the music from the Legend of Zelda video games.
Video game, yeah.
Which I didn't know that video game was written more for the music than anything else. That's why you play the ocarina in one of them. Every Zelda piece had a sound that had never been heard by the human ear before at some point.
Yeah.
And they had like 100-piece Japanese orchestra, do all the soundtracks and stuff. So it wasn't the easiest gig I ever had, but I definitely learned a lot, and I got to play crotallies and all kinds of like really cool things. But I had never been in an orchestra that had a click track. All 70 members had that in their ear. Whether it be 7/8 or 5/4 or whatever.
Did they have tracks going too, or was it just?
It wasn't any tracks. And this was it was a touring show that was coming through. They came through Louisville, was touring all over the world. But when they needed extra players, they would get with somebody and hire in extra players.
Get a contractor,
Yeah. So I, not only do I love reading, but that was a fascinating thing to be reading, but to have that click in your ear. Yeah. And I'm always encouraging my kids to play with the click. Obviously, if you're gonna, learn rhythm, you definitely need that.
Playing with an orchestra is always, if you're used to playing with small ensembles, and then you have to play with the orchestra, and you haven't done it for a while. I did a thing with the LO year before last, and it was like a solo thing, myself and Jacob Duncan, and it took me a minute to get back on board with the fact that the conductor gives the downbeat, they perceive the downbeat, then everybody plays the downbeat. It was I had David Borman III in here, and he's a really young guy, but he's incredibly talented. U of L music school guy. He is the assistant conductor with the Louisville Civic Orchestra. And I was talking to him because I thought he's 22. That seems awful young for a conductor. But also Teddy Abrams is pretty young too. And conductors are fascinating to me, and he's a really good one. He hired me for Godspell and a couple of other like musical things, and I just thought he'd be fascinating to talk to. I think he works over at Mom's. He teaches private over at Maxwell's House of Music. And, does a lot of cool stuff with the Well, he was, in fact, the one that hired me for the Palace gig at U of L. Yeah. I mean, I just thought, man, to get, how do you get to be a conductor? Fascinating. You start conducting. Yeah. And he said kind of the same thing. He's I think he's getting a master's in conducting from U of L. But he just stroke of luck kind of thing. And he found a great mentor who took him under his wing and kind of showed him, and so now he's assistant, conducting for the Louisville Civic Orchestra, and a great. If you ever get to jam with him, do it. He's young, but he's so good. It always blows my mind when these 20-year-olds. What's he play? He plays piano. He also sings. Yeah, I think he plays a multitude of different instruments, but piano is his main. Seems like most everybody has that base foundation of piano. Piano's a good thing. It's all right there in front of you. Yeah. if I had it to do over, maybe I'd think more about a piano. But then if you got to carry keys around,
right? Yeah. In fact, I found myself taking like piano lessons here and there from just the great piano players I'm around, you know, and learning things here and there from them. Just because piano is a fascinating instrument, like you said. And what blows my mind is there's literally like 12 notes that make up everything on a piano. They're just in different octaves.
It's all right there in front of you. You just got to go find it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm very basic. I just know my little chords. I know some inverted, and I've known some dissidents, and you know, and that's about it.
Yeah, I can't play keyboard at all, and I cannot play a drum kit. I'm kind of like,
really?
Oh yeah, I'm like one of those wind-up monkey toys where my hands all go the same way.
You know, interesting enough, you bring that up. I have found from teaching kids that. Okay, so usually when you're playing drums, your hands are opposites.
Opposite, yeah.
Well, so therefore, a lot of people don't study their hands doing the same thing. Yeah. But like Marvin Maxwell is, I consider the king of the shuffle. Mm-hmm. You know, the double shuffle, the da 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 da. That's you play both your hands at the same time. And then I was teaching Rock and Roll, the intro by Led Zeppelin. Mm-hmm. That one I feel is so incredibly hard because he plays both hands at the same time. Yeah. So if you're used to just playing opposites, that throws you for a loop. But and I've found that as a player, those two grooves right there are some of the hardest two to get. And it's fascinating to me.
Maybe if I decide I want to carry around a drum kit, I can specialize in those
right,
too.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to carry around a drum kit. Trust me. What I was telling you too earlier about teaching the kids, it's like we're creating little Frankensteins, you know. And I just want to, as a teacher, give them the tools and then watch them grow and fly.
It's amazing how, you know, kids these days, they have so many resources. It's amazing how quick they can pick stuff up.
Oh,
you know? It just...
They can go to YouTube and look up any way to play anything.
Anything, you know. Starting out, somebody will show you how to do it, or you can watch who originally did it 3 different ways, and be somebody on there teaching another way to do it. And
well, Jarboe even said, his wife, Jeff Jarboe from the Wolf Brothers, he said his wife asked him, "Why are you still practicing?" Because he still practices. Yeah. And he said he'll pull up on his iPad one of the 3-year-olds playing like Zeppelin and go, "This is why." Do you see this 3-year-old and what they're doing? Like, it's mind-blowing to me because for me, almost every instrument is muscle memory. Oh, yeah. And it's like, how are these 3-year-olds that have not even been doing it that long, you know, figure that out?
They're a blank slate. They don't know that they can't do it, you know, emotionally and mentally. They don't think they can't do it. They're just going to sit down and figure out how to do it. Yeah. So then they learn how to do it.
They're smart, man, I tell you what.
It's not that big a deal because they've not been told they couldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. That's a great point.
You know, you just sort of have to try and keep being a blank slate to some degree.
Yeah, no kidding.
And hope the rest of your muscles will hold up.
Man, yeah. Well, I teach a lot about muscle memory. Obviously, drumming is playing patterns. So I try to break it down to, you know, you have 2 limbs, you know, your right arm and your left arm, and you got 2 limbs on the bottom half, your right leg and your left leg. So it's just about figuring out patterns of those and doing it slow and repetitious. And then once you do that, then the muscle memory sets in. Because we never know when muscle memory really sets in until we can just do it without thinking about it. And that's always... I've noticed it's always different levels for different people, and you just never know when it's going to set in. But I just try to teach that a lot, so it just makes it as easy as possible. Because I do feel like I don't play string instruments, obviously, but even for piano, I would think you're just learning the muscles and your fingers. Where are they moving? What are the patterns?
It's vocabulary. You're learning segments and words, and you're going to put a complete sentence together with what words you know, so you need to...
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, Steve, it's been a pleasure having you in on the show here at LRS102.com. I really appreciate you coming in. I could sit here and talk to you all day about gigs. Is there any gigs you've got coming up that people can check you out at? You got anything? I know you're out of the city a lot, too.
Where am I going to be? I think the next public thing that I've got... I think we're playing Johnny Berry. We're playing at the Kentucky Kickdown down there at Turner's, the hot rod motorcycle thing.
I love that.
We're playing down there whenever that is, and we always do a standing Johnny Berry gig the last Saturday of every month down at Turner's on the river.
Okay, so last Saturday of this month, you check him out down there at Turner's. That's a groovy little space, too.
most everything else I got going on is either a corporate event or a private party.
Yeah.
So
that's why you make the big money doing it.
I don't know if I make the big money.
I hear you. Well, that's why you stay busy, though. Those corporate events are better than
I'm
some
glad
of
to
these
keep the lights on at the house.
Yeah, same. I feel you on that. Well, Steve, as always, it's been a pleasure. Is there anything that we've left out that we should talk about? I think we got it all in there, right?
We covered a whole lot of territory.
Yeah, well, keep banjoing on, man. I love a banjo. It's one of my favorite instruments, obviously, because of my grandma and all that good stuff. And
it's one of my favorites, too.
Yeah, and I wish you well in your adventures, Guitar Emporium, everything that you're a part of. I wish you much success as always. Thank you again for being on our show. I really appreciate it. And we're gonna kick it in with 3 Dog Night. And as always, I'm Jen Yates on Jyneration Nation, LRS. We want you to tune in every day, Monday through Friday, 2 to 4. We have the coolest guest in on the show. It's really awesome. And we get to spin some cool rock and roll. I'm going to throw it back with some 3 Dog Nights. Black and White, you're locked on to the Walrus.